Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather, and we appreciate you watching. As always, we appreciate your comments and feedback. If there's something on the show that you'd like to see more of or less of, or we're not meeting your needs in some way in your part of Alaska, please let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is an easy way to find me online. Now, you can always find your forecast online at weather.gov/Alaska. A couple clicks will get you to your local forecast information or your aviation charts, or your Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center forecast for your river in your part of Alaska. If you haven't tried it yet, give the Alaska Weather Information Line a call, 1-800-472-0391, and on your mobile device, mobile.weather.gov is a faster way when you have low bandwidth connections to use a faster, leaner, meaner, easier to use web page there that might work a little bit better on saving you some money too. Let's take a look at the drought monitor for Southeast. We are still tracking extreme drought across southern parts of Southeast, generally south of Petersburg to Heidelberg and to Ketchikan. Conditions remain pretty dry. Now, we have had several areas of rain passing through the region, and the levels in some of the reservoirs are coming up, but still all factored in together with the season combined, looking back at precipitation averages and what we've seen so far in the last year or so, that puts conditions into pretty severely dry conditions here. So again, that's the extreme level you see here in that brighter red color. A little bit further north of that, just up to Petersburg, all the way out toward Hyder, you get into severe and moderate drought. And then north of that, we're into abnormally and moderate drought kind of conditions, which does include Juneau, up toward Haines, out toward Gustavus, Sitka, and northward toward Yakutat. So this really does affect all of Southeast, at least in some manner. And it looks like things are moving toward a drier situation, at least for about 24 hours there in Southeast. Now up north, colder air is spilling over the Brooks Range, and you wouldn't know it if you're in Arctic Village. This is what we see right here looking northward today. Temperature around the 3 o'clock hour was about 61 beautiful degrees in Arctic Village as you look out at the runway. And just to the north, on the other side of the mountains there, is where cooler air is pushing in. And as that's coming in, there has been some snow in the higher terrain there, generally about 2,000 to 3,000 feet. We understand as much as 2 to 3 inches of snow still possible east of the Dalton Highway. So if you've got travel plans heading that way, whether you're in Arctic Village tonight or you're moving up and down the road, you will expect to find a couple inches of snow probably on the roadway there. As we look at fire danger, we know that more and more fire reports are coming in across Southwest and across the Kenai Peninsula. A lot of these have been lightning starts, and conditions will be drying up as we go into the next 2 weeks here. It looks like we're moving into a drier pattern, which is totally normal for this time of the year. The problem is, though, that, of course, that lends to a greater fire risk. And right now we see high to maybe even extreme fire danger across the upper Yukon Valley, and then high fire danger across parts of the region north of the Alaska Range, south of the Yukon Valley, and into Southwest, and also around the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and then hit and miss spots around some of our southwestern capes and around the Bristol Bay region. The western Kenai Peninsula, all looking relatively dry and drying out as fire danger is going up. Let's take a look at the satellite picture for today. You can see that cool air we were talking about pushing in across the Beaufort Seacoast. The frontal boundary is just kind of hovering right about here. And that pool of cool air is going to have a really hard time pushing southward a whole lot more. It's trying. It might actually do it here in the next day or so. But for right now, it's just kind of nosing its way into the central and eastern parts of the Brooks Range. Out ahead of that is where we have a lot of heating going on. The intense, nearly 24-hour sunshine beating down on the Alaska grounds and the tundra. That's allowing clouds to bubble up south of Fairbanks all the way into southwestern Alaska. And if you look carefully here in the visible satellite picture, you can see several swirls across the eastern Gulf. There's one, there's another, and each one of these is trying to slosh clouds up into southeastern Alaska. The heat of the day is helping to clear the sky for many locations there, but clouds are billowing up over the mountains as well. A look out to the west shows low pressure south of Unalaska and Sandpoint. We have another frontal boundary right about here. You can almost pick out some of those lines right here in the satellite picture. This front is going to hover right across the Alaska Peninsula and the Western Gulf for the next day or so, trying to move into where high pressure is protecting the Gulf now. This front will gradually creep eastward. You can kind of see it working its way north and eastward right now. Another disturbance here across the northern Gulf won't amount to very much. Out across the west, several other eddies and high pressure in control out across the western Bering. That's locking in areas of fog across parts of eastern Russia. This is probably ice, what you're looking at here across the northern coast, and areas of fog here across the west. More of that to come, it looks like, but a dry sky for most across the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound. Plenty of sunshine for you today. Let's take a look at your weather map, and low pressure sitting across the North Pacific at 990 millibars will keep areas of light rain possible through the rest of the day. Areas of fog here across the southern Bering and out across the western Bering, and plenty of sunshine again on the eastern side of this high pressure ridge as we just saw. High pressure is trying to form south of the, or north I should say, of the frontal boundary that's working its way across the Brooks Range. A lot of cool air back behind that. Temperatures only in the 30s for most cases there. High pressure sitting across the north and eastern Gulf as strong as 1,024 millibars. Our friends down in the Pacific Northwest are roasting because of that. Low pressure will hover right across the eastern Brooks Range tonight, and for most areas that are higher up in elevation, rain and snow is possible there, and most areas east of the Dalton Highway could see some minor accumulations. Most of you in your village are not going to see that. Don't expect to see anything more than a flake or a drop. The best chance of accumulating snow will be much higher in elevation, so we're not really worried about that where you are. Showers across the eastern Alaska Range, and still expecting some to fall across parts of southwest. Fog overnight may be possible around the Kenai Peninsula and near Cook Inlet, and also for southeastern Alaska. And for those of you working late on your boats tonight to get ready for the commercial opener on Saturday, well, we see a high pressure ridge right now sitting across your region for Friday, so weather should be fair and seas should be small if you're going to make a test run. Checking the nets on Friday should be okay and dry. Low pressure south of the Alaska Peninsula at 992 millibars shows that front working up across the Gulf of Alaska. And once again, that ridge is going to try and block that and dissipate anything you see moving across the Gulf for Friday. What that means, though, is there will be plenty of heat available for shower and storm production across the central and southern parts of the interior and over the Alaska Range. And that's also going to allow this cooler air to drop just a little bit further southward as we head into your Friday. But it doesn't look like there's going to be a great chance of any mixed precipitation making it much further south than that. So all that will stay up at higher terrain. As we get into Saturday, again, a commercial opener in southeast, you can see a little bit of rain starting to sneak into at least the southern panhandle. Now, after talking with the forecasters in Juneau, their expert opinion is that right now, northern parts of southeast will probably stay on the drier side, but they caution me to let you know that a lot of this moisture is really wanting to work northward, so they've got some question marks about how far north that can travel for Saturday. So watch for updates here. This may change a little bit, but for right now, at least in northern parts of southeast, it's looking like at least the drier end of the next wave of precipitation coming in your general direction. For Saturday now, showers and thunderstorms will be back across the southern interior. Showers again across south central and southwest as low pressure starts to kind of fall apart and fill in. We're still getting a southerly flow working its way up across Kodiak Island into Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula. Out across the west, high pressure still in charge, and that's giving us that light northerly flow, areas of fog, well, some light rain, and maybe some drizzle on the islands, but that's just about it. High pressure up across the north will settle in. That'll break up a lot of clouds for the Brooks Range, but probably lock in clouds right around the coastal areas at 1,021 millibars. There should be a light north and easterly breeze as we get into the weekend. Let's take a look at your temperatures now for southeast, upper 40s and lower 50s for many. South central, just about 50 degrees or cooler, 48 around Kodiak, about the same in Cordova. Middle Tanana Valley, you're looking at overnight lows in the lower 50s, and the North Slope, well, you can see the effects of that cool air. Lower 30s, some places just below freezing, like Utqiagvik. As you get up toward Anaktuvuk Pass, milder and 41 as you get out of that cold air. 53 in Nome, 43 in Shishmaref, about the same for Gamble and Sabunga, 47 in Makoriuk. Adak, you're looking at a mild 43 with the high. 46 tomorrow out there in the central chain. Atka, 51. Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, lower 50s for you. Sandpoint and most of your friends up and down the Alaska Peninsula looking at temps in the 50s. Temps in the 60s for the Bristol Bay region. Bethel up to 72, and many areas across the interior and the lowlands around the Yukon Valley and the Kuskokwim should easily see temperatures back in the mid-70s tomorrow. Fairbanks will be right there with you at 75. Lower to mid-60s for most of southeast. That's what dry air does in the Panhandle. It should be a beautiful day, but again, you sure do need the rain. Upper 50s and mid-60s for most of Prince William Sound. Valdez could be fairly mild there. Glen Allen, Gulkana, about 70 degrees for you. And Aktivik Pass closer to 47 degrees, about what we see in Shishmaref, Wainwright near 40, Utqiagvik, Kaktovik, and Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse all holding in the mid-30s tomorrow. Saturday morning temperatures will also go below freezing, it looks like, for many on the North Slope. 29 for Utqiagvik. Looks like Kotzebue, about 48 degrees, close to what we see in Unalakleet, Galena, Huslia, Ruby, all looking at temps in the upper 40s to mid-50s. As you get up toward Tanana and Fairbanks, temps will hold there in the mid-40s to about 50 degrees. Ambler and Bettles also in the mid-40s. Bristol Bay temperatures will cool off on Saturday morning into the upper 40s, and 48 in Kodiak, with Homer coming in at 45. High temperatures on Saturday, we see mid-50s to about 60 degrees in southeast. Again, that rain starting to work in from the south will start to cool things down, as well as additional cloud cover. Notice the interior temperatures are coming down a little bit as well. Most areas not even hitting the 70-degree mark for your Saturday. 30s and about 40 degrees for the North Slope. Temperatures are coming up here for Wainwright out toward Kaktovik, 55 around Arctic Village, 60 in Nome and Unalakleet, 65 as you get out toward Ruby and Huslia, and about 70 degrees or so around Bethel. 50s for most of Southwest, and 50 degrees on the button for St. Paul and St. George. Let's take a look at the climate trends as we get out past our normal forecast period and into the 8 to 14 day period. So 2 weeks from now, we're talking about things warming up. There's a good chance that temperatures are going to be warmer than normal for Kotzebue Sound all the way into the YK Delta, Southwest, Kodiak Island, the Kenai Peninsula. And you can see those warmer signals here out across northeast and parts of southeastern Alaska. What about precipitation? Well, that's not great news. It looks like for fire weather concerns, this would not be a signal that we would want to see, but it is certainly one we would expect as this is a drier time of the year. It looks like below normal conditions for precipitation are expected and a little more possible anyway across parts of southwestern Alaska, and slightly drier than normal conditions for the interior and continued drier than normal conditions for southeast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to your aviation weather now. Look for IFR conditions to start us out across the Beaufort Seacoast, maybe just to the west of Point Barrow, with a broad area of MVFR just to the south as that frontal boundary is working its way south and east. A lot of cool air and moisture coming in with that, so some low decks are certainly possible. Watch for a batch of IFR north of the Bering Strait off the Chukchi coast, and then widespread IFR across the central and western chain and across the Pacific coast and around Kodiak Island in the morning tomorrow. Southeast will start out with MVFR, but improvements are coming your way. Look for that to spread all the way across into Prince William Sound and parts of Cook Inlet and over Kodiak Island. As we get into the afternoon tomorrow, watch for improvements across a large part of southeast. You'll see IFR conditions there across Kodiak Island and the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Those will linger. IFR stays out of Prince William Sound for the most part, but marginal conditions should continue all the way through Seward, down into Homer, and then eastward across the Copper River coastline and in toward Yakutat, but just out of most of southeast. Widespread shower and thunderstorm activity is back again north of the Alaska Range and into southwestern Alaska, and generally along and just north of the Yukon Valley in the eastern interior. IFR lingers around the Beaufort Seacoast and will hover out across the central and western parts of the Aleutians for your afternoon. For Saturday morning, watch for MVFR conditions lingering across the outer coast of southeast. IFR lingers across the Gulf and pushes in through the Barrens and the eastern side of Kodiak Island. IFR nudges right up against Sand Point and to the west across the central and western chain, with MVFR decreasing across the northern parts of the Bering, but still sneaking its way into parts of the Kuskokwim Delta and parts of Bristol Bay. Look for MVFR across the Alaska Range and still hovering across the coastal plain, with IFR also pulling back just a little bit along the Beaufort Seacoast. You'll see it kind of washing westward again. West of Point Barrow and down toward Wainwright Saturday afternoon. Widespread shower and storm activity still possible Saturday afternoon from southwest and generally north of the Alaska Range and south of the Yukon Valley. IFR conditions will continue for the Gulf Coast, but just out of southeast, so things still looking good there. Marginal conditions for Prince William Sound, Kodiak, and then just to your south and west for places like AKwx all the way down toward Chignik and Sand Point. Watch for IFR conditions there, probably just sneaking into Falls Pass, and Cold Bay. Here's a look at your pass conditions, and I think it looks like MVFR for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass as you get your Friday started and finished tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass right now look to be VFR. Rainy Pass we're going to call visual flight rule all day long. Windy Pass looks to be pretty good. Isabel Pass so far VFR, and Mentasta Pass for Friday calling VFR there. Tanita Pass also looking to be VFR conditions for you. Portage Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions through most of your day, and Chilkoot and White Pass look to see improvement pretty quickly in the day from marginal to VFR. Freezing levels show us that cool pool of air across the North Slope really isn't taking any greater surges southward at this point. It's going to hover very close to the Brooks Range summits and northward, with levels along the coast at 2,000 feet, levels closer to Arctic Village around 6,000 feet, south of the Yukon Valley already up to 8,000 feet, and then south of the Dixon entrance 10,000 feet. So there's a lot of warm air still hovering across southeast and the southern third of the state. Out around southwest, look for levels mostly along the coastline to be at 8,000 feet or even higher there, so temperatures are certainly fairly mild. Icing potential remains on the high side, above 9,000 feet, but there is some moisture there. If you're flying high over the Brooks Range, you're going to encounter that. Isolated moderate may be possible at 9 or above. Widely scattered shower and storm activity does imply intense convection and the possibility for isolated severe icing, so steer clear of that. And from Kodiak Island all the way out through the eastern chain, isolated moderate icing above 9,000 feet will be possible there. Here's the jet stream, and kind of a big mess here, but what you should really pick out is where the ridge is, and that extends all the way up the spine of the Rockies into Alaska and the thumb of North America right here, and it looks like this area will maintain its ridge of high pressure. With that, we have the most active weather coming in from the south, 55 to 105 knots there into the Gulf of Alaska, and a lot of the cooler air sliding south and east of Alaska at this point. At 9,000 feet, the pattern becomes a little more clear. You can see a broad easterly flow sweeping across southwestern Alaska, 30 to 35 knots. Light flow coming in across the eastern Gulf and southeast, about 10 to 15 knots, and northwesterlies coming in across the interior, 20 to 30 knots. Some of those also northerly across the North Slope, 10 to 15 knots there, 20 knots around Kaktovik at 3,000 feet. Your easterly flow picks up again across Bristol Bay, 25 to 30 knots there. Stronger winds at times across the Alaska Peninsula, and our ridge of high pressure still holding on to south central and southeast, 15 to 25. What about turbulence? We're going to focus on areas from, well, let's say Seward out toward Lake Iliamna, all the way down toward Cold Bay and Falls Pass, generally below 4,000 feet for the potential of considerable moderate.
The M planets. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. Elementary school teachers try all sorts of ways to get their students to remember the order of the planets.
My favorite has to be the saying, "My very educated mother just served us nachos."
Yum! I could go for some nachos right now.
Me too, but James, we need to focus. The first letter of each word stands for the first letter of each planet.
So, my is for Mercury, the closest planet to the sun. Very is for Venus, and all the way to the farthest planet from the sun, Neptune.
Of course, there are two M's in there, Mercury and Mars, and it just so happens that the two M planets are coming together in the evening sky.
And that means it's conjunction time.
Let's head to the sky and check it all out. Okay, we have our sky set up for Saturday night, June 15th, just after sunset, facing toward the northwest. As the sun sets, the stars will start to pop out.
Now, finding our M planets is going to be a tough assignment. You will need a clear view of the northwestern horizon, and you'll have to time it perfectly.
Look too early, and it'll still be too bright outside.
Look too late, and they will have set.
Just above the horizon, and I mean just above the horizon, you may see two stars appear very close together.
The brighter of the two is the elusive planet Mercury, while the dimmer one is the red planet Mars.
Let's look at this from space to see how two planets that are very far away from each other look all lined up. Here we are, high above the solar system, looking down on the inner planets. There's Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars.
No nachos, unfortunately.
No, Neptune is billions of miles out of the picture.
The planets revolve around the sun in the same direction, but they don't go the same speed. The closer you are to the sun, the faster you go.
So, while it takes Earth 365 days to circle the sun, it only takes Mercury 88 days. And Mars, who's moving a lot slower, takes 687 days.
Now, as we approach mid-June 2019, we will see the alignment of Mercury and Mars. Mercury is in between us and the sun and only about 90 million miles away.
Only 90 million miles, he says, because Mars is on the opposite side of the sun and is a whopping 232 million miles away. This is why tiny Mercury seems so much brighter than larger Mars. It's a lot closer to us.
So, these M planets only appear close together from Earth. Let's head back home to see the peak of the conjunction. Okay, we're back on Earth on June 15th, seeing Mercury at 90 million miles away and Mars at 232 million miles away. What makes planets interesting to observe is how they move from night to night.
Let's move time forward one night at a time. Here's June 16th, June 17th, and June 18th.
Mercury seems to snuggle up next to Mars, and here is the zoomed-in view. They'll only be about 1/4 of a degree apart, so you may be able to see both planets through a telescope at the same time.
Of course, your view won't be nearly as good as these. This is the view of Mercury from the Messenger spacecraft, which orbited there from 2011 to 2015.
And here is the global map of Mars taken by the many orbiting satellites we sent up there.
The M planets are truly marvelous.
So, there you have it. How to look for Mercury and Mars in the night sky this weekend.
Mercury is always tough to find since it doesn't stray far from the sun.
And this might be the last chance to see Mars before it heads behind the sun.
And if you never learn the order of the planets, shame on your teachers, repeat the saying daily, "My very educated mother just served us nachos."
We have to do a show on Neptune.
Yeah, just so we can get some nachos.
Exactly.
The universe is full of planets and nachos, and it's all there when you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And time for a marine weather update. And sea ice continues to erode north and east of Utqiagvik and west down the Chukchi coast. You'll notice a broad area of generally open water here. Not sea ice free yet, of course, but open water. And that marginal ice zone probably hasn't changed a whole lot since yesterday. Satellite views of the area were not as good as they were yesterday. So a lot of the changes that you see in the analysis probably are not very significant. You can see several areas where the ice is kind of bunched up on some of the shoals across the Chukchi coast. And we continue to see a little bit of ice across many of the bays and the passes there across some of the coastal areas. So keep that in mind. Coastal areas are going to be the slowest to see reductions in the ice. For the very latest information, outlook and forecast, head to weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to southeast now. Winds will stay out of the south tomorrow as you're looking at 20 knots and 4-foot seas in the Lynn Canal. Light winds across the central and southern inside passage. Southerlies coming up the outer coast. 10 to 15 knots and 5-foot seas expected there tomorrow. As we head into Saturday, the commercial opener, of course, southerlies for the Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3-foot seas. Light winds for Stevens Passage, a little bit stronger flow there for the Clarence Strait, 20 knots and 4-foot seas. And the outer coast looking at a steady southeast flow at 20 knots with 6 to 7-foot seas there as rain will be moving in from the south. Again, question marks about how far north that will go. For South Central, light winds inside of Prince William Sound, 10 knots and 2-foot seas. About the same conditions there in Cook Inlet. A little bit of a stronger easterly flow making its way through the Barren Islands, of course, as usual. 25 knots and 5 to 7-foot seas there. 4-foot seas on the other side of Hitchinbrook entrance. Winds will become steady from the east at 20 knots across the north and western Gulf for Saturday. They'll come up a little bit more in Prince William Sound. 15 knots and 3-foot seas for Father's Day. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet. 15 knots, 3-foot seas for you, and 5 to 8-foot seas over the Barrens as we look at Saturday. For Friday around Bristol Bay, easterlies at 20 with a 4-foot sea, northeasterlies 25 with 8-foot seas in Chillicothe, easterlies 25 to 30 across the north and western Gulf, looking for 9 to 11-foot seas there, and northeasterlies picking up a little bit too as down the Bering Sea coast. on the Alaska Peninsula there, a 30-knot wind from the north and east. That diminishes by Saturday down to 20 knots as low pressure is just kind of hovering right in here. It's kind of becoming a little more diffuse and weakening as we get into the rest of the weekend with easterlies over Shelikof Strait, 6-foot seas. There's 7-foot seas coming out of Kodiak and 8 to 9-foot seas coming down the Alaska Peninsula coastline, 20 to 25 on Saturday. For the chain, northerlies through the central and western Aleutians, 15 to 25 at the greatest, 20 to 25 for the eastern chain with 8-foot seas there, 7-foot seas south of Nikolsky, and 5 to 6-foot seas out across the western chain, again with a little bit higher seas there to your north and east heading out towards St. Paul. Winds will diminish to the east of you. Winds will pick up a little bit more out to the west and southwest. Look for a northwesterly shift there west of Atka, 20 knots with a 6 to 7-foot sea, and northerlies holding around 25 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas there from Atka out toward Unalaska. On Friday, down the west coast, northerlies should be light, 10 knots and 2-foot seas in Norton Sound. Northeasterlies a little bit stronger north of Nunivak Island out toward St. Matthew, 15 knots and 3 to 4-foot seas there. 5 to 7-foot seas, 20 to 25 with north and easterly wind coming out of the Kuskokwim Delta on Friday. You'll see winds diminish in that area on Saturday. And it should be relatively small seas and light winds into Bristol Bay. Northerlies coming out of Norton Sound and up towards St. Lawrence Island, 20 to 25 with 4 to 6-foot seas on Saturday. And across the north, Beaufort Seacoast winds, northeasterlies, 15 knots and 2 to 3-foot seas. Easterly flow from Wainwright down to Point Lay. A little bit more of an onshore flow from Cape Lisburne southward into Kotzebue Sound, though. 15 knots and 3-foot seas for you. As we get into Saturday, winds diminish, and we'll still see some very small seas there, 1 to 2 feet around the Beaufort. There may be some ice moving around into the region here, so watch for that forecast to change. And north and easterlies down the Chukchi Coast pick up 15 to 20 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas there on your Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, low pressure in the western Gulf and North Pacific will hover across the region for the rest of the weekend, it looks like, and this will gradually diminish as it moves eastward. Watch for periods of rain and some occasional stronger winds around the Alaska Peninsula, as we just saw. Up north, cooler air is dropping southward. We expect to see some light accumulations of snow generally east of the Dalton Highway. It doesn't look like we're going to see any snow in any of our village areas there. Most of that will be at higher elevations. South of that, warm air continues to hold over the interior and southwest and thus creates showers and thunderstorms that we'll see pretty much every afternoon. But that line should be shifting southward as we get into Friday and Saturday with high pressure sitting over south central and a large part of southeast. It's going to be very warm. And as we get into Saturday, that shifts ever so slightly, pushing some moisture back up into southern parts of southeast for the commercial opener and Father's Day. It looks like that rain could be heading a little bit further north as we go. Showers and storms for the interior. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.